now I'll begin the recording. So, welcome everyone and very good evening. Today is a very short and sweet workshop on how to basically play a spellcaster. Today's session is really going to be just more of the basics. It's not going to go into too in-depth. So things I'm not covering today, for example, will be multi-classing and feats. But I'm gonna try to keep today's session a little bit more interactive. So there'll be some quizzes, Q&As, and of course a session for you to just kind of let me know if you have any burning questions you'd like me to address. Burning, haha, in the Spellcaster workshop. For any classes that you may feel that you need a bit more personal advice on how to play or how to plan a Spellcaster. So, today's disclaimers. Hello, I can't see the Discord chat at the moment, but I assume that you'll be able to see my screen. And as I was just sharing, I've just only started today's workshop. And today's workshop, it's going to contain a few segments which are subjective in nature. Mainly, it's the last segment where I talk about the classes. And it's going to be catered more towards new players who aren't very familiar towards spellcasting. It's to make sure that, martials are quite straightforward. You punch things, you kick things, you slash things. Whereas a spellcaster can sometimes be intimidating, and today's workshop aims to help you know a little bit better about your spells, help you know a little bit better about spellcasters, so that you can decide if you want to play one moving forward. Most of my sharing today is really going to be on core D&D rather than AL D&D. AL D&D is an anomaly at the moment, especially with the new historic changes, where you can remake your character between every session. So regardless, I'll be sharing some things which is based on the AL specific things. So for example, wizards. There are pros and cons to playing spellcasters in AL. The pros far outweigh the cons if you ask me, but I'll probably keep that for another session. And generally, what do spells do? Spells do exactly as they say. Nothing more, nothing less. This is very important because some spells are just very non-descriptive. The classic example is grease. A puddle of grease appears underneath the enemy, they fall down if they fail a save. That's fine. But let's say you throw a fire bolt on it, or even just drop a torch on it. What happens? It doesn't burn. That doesn't make any sense. So what I want you all to remember after today's workshop is nobody truly knows all the rules of D&D, and that is my core belief that, sometimes, especially as a DM, it can be very hard to remember all of the rules. So, especially in a setting where you have to, DM for 7 players in the table. So a DM may make a decision that just to keep the game running, that's okay. Maybe they don't fully remember every single detail of spells. That is a-okay. Trust your DM. He may make a decision on the spot and may even rule of cool it. For example, earlier when I mentioned grease does not catch fire, it makes absolutely no sense. Some DMs will choose to follow a rules as intended or a rules as fun method in running their games, and therefore decide that, yeah, sure, you can get an extra 1d4 worth of damage. It will go away when grease goes away, and that is actually something that does happen on a daily basis with your D&D games, as I'm sure you've seen. Alright, so if necessary, however, because your DM has a lot of things to run, remind your DM. Sometimes the spell works differently, or you notice someone needs a little bit help with their spells, you can raise it at the table. The DM can choose to follow his previous judgment or to listen to what your current suggestion is. It really depends on the situation and depends on how familiar he is with each and every spell. So those are the disclaimers today. Remember, the most important thing is nobody truly knows all the rules of D&D. Trust your DM. If they feel that the spell works this way and has ruled on the spot that it should work this way for today, just let it be, and we shall see. The next session or after the session, you can perhaps have a discussion with him and try to understand a little bit better. I'm sure all of you, during your playtime in the Malaysian AL server, have, of course, asked various questions during the sessions, during breaks, after the session. That's a-okay. Most DMs will be happy that you're so interested in your character and what they can do. Alright, so without further ado, I'm going to share with you today's agenda, and I put in an extra topic today because I feel that, first things first, spellcasting basics is meant for you to just kind of understand, oh, okay, that's how the spellcasting works as a basics. This is going to be the most detailed part because, again, today is more of a back to basics workshop. And the second part of today's session is on online ethique when it comes to spellcasting. Nowadays, with the lockdown, most games, especially in the AL Malaysian server, is run on Roll20. So what does this mean at the end of the day is, there's a lot of things that you can help your DM with when you run a system in a virtual tabletop to show your DM, okay, this is where I want to cast a spell. So I realized that some players may not know how to do that on Roll20, and today there's going to be a quick showing of how to do so. And then thirdly, common spellcasting misconceptions. This happens quite a bit, especially for those that aren't familiar with spellcasting and for those that level very rapidly. In a home game, sometimes you take maybe 20-30 hours to level from level 5 to level 6 because of it's based on milestones. In a shared world setting such as Adventurers League, you can level up perhaps quite rapidly, but sometimes you just don't get the full nuances of spellcasting. So I've included a few common spellcasting misconceptions that I see, and last but not least is a few opinions I have on spellcasters, as well as if you need any help with them, I'll be happy to share what I feel about them, and if anyone else wants to chip in on their experience playing it, please do feel free. Okay, so just to make sure everyone is aware, can I just get a quick reply on voice? I also don't know if my voice is working, so that's a good try. Let's try with Zach. Okay, Dolly, could you reply please and see if I lost it? Oh, Dolly. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
good.
Okay.
Very good. So, moving on. Why am I looking at here? Okay. Sure. So, next, first off, I'm going to start off today with a bit of basics on spellcasting. Spellcasting is basically flavor-wise in the world of Faerun, in the world of D&D. It is a specific magical effect that you are manipulating the weave. So it depends on the world setting that you're playing in. In the Forgotten Realms, the magic around them is called the weave. In a lot of other video games, you may recognize this as mana or what have you. It's where you use the force of your will, your arcane knowledge, or even just your inner birthright to be able to exact power on the weave and create a small limited effect, which is known as a spell. And that's why the spells, the higher your character level, the more experienced they are with handling the weave and are able to cast stronger and stronger spells. Some spells have the ritual tag, and this is very important because if you're not familiar, some classes are not ritual casters. For example, warlocks. Warlocks are what we consider full casters, or rather pseudo casters, because they don't learn the magic but is given the power to learn it by the patron. They don't actually have the ability to ritual cast certain spells. So some classes can do it, some classes aren't able to do it. If you can do it, you can choose to spend an extra 10 minutes to cast that spell as a ritual, and that does not expand your spell slot. So one misconception that I do see here sometimes is, oh, it just takes 10 minutes to cast a spell regardless of the original cast time. That is normally seen with Find Familiar, I believe, because Find Familiar, I've heard people saying, oh, I'll take 10 minutes to ritual summon my familiar. It actually takes 70 minutes if you ritual cast it, because the original cast time of that is a full hour, and plus 10 minutes, that is 70 minutes. Okay, and spells, they go from the 0th to the 9th level, and different casters have access to different spell slots at a different rate. So I've put in a very quick table here. Cantrips are a little bit special among all of these spells. You normally get them as soon as you're able to cast spells, because they are integral to your character. And this is why in the previous seasons of D&D, a Cantrip is something that is magically integral to your character. For most spellcasters, they can swap spells as they level up, except for cantrips, because these cantrips are able to scale with levels. So when I am talking down here about spell levels, and 1/3 casters, half casters, full casters, some of you may understand what these terms refer to, but this is really a community shorthand for how these classes gain spell slots. You need to be a certain level to gain spell slots as a 1/3 caster, half caster, or a full caster. And what are these specific classes? It's actually listed in the next slide, which would be here. So, a 1/3 casters would be the classes that originally didn't have a magic in their base class, but has a subclass that allows them access to the weave, such as the Eldritch Knight and the Arcane Trickster. They basically will learn the spells at a much slower rate, but this is on top of their base chassis of a martial class that's able to attack quite well, for example. A half-caster will only ever be able to get up to 5th level spell slots, so they include the Artificer, the Ranger, and the Paladin. Normally for these classes, they have a few other tricks up their sleeve, are either decent fighters themselves, or they have other abilities that help them to match up with other classes in the game. And we of course have the full spellcasters. So full spellcasters are people who gain spell slots at a much faster rate. They tend to be on the squishier side, more easily taken down, but they have access to the higher level spells much faster than everyone else. That's the Wizard, the Sorcerer, the Cleric, the Druid, and the Bard. And last but not least, there is a class which I call the pseudo spellcasters. What does that really mean? These classes, they don't conventionally learn how to cast spells, but a few abilities of theirs, either it's a form of a spell, so the Warlock doesn't get spellcasting, the Warlock actually gets pact magic from their patron, and that's why they can only cast spells at the highest level that they can, because their magic is taught to them by a different entity, rather than a wizard who learns how to read his books through many years of study, is able to come up with how to weave, how to manipulate the weave. The sorcerer has inborn magical powers, either due to their parentage or due to an event that happened earlier in their life. Clerics are due to their belief in their god. Sometimes it is directly bestowed upon them by their god themselves, but that will depend on the DM and the setting. Druids, on the other hand, get their powers from nature itself. So they all are able to manipulate the weave. The Bard is a little bit special in the sense that he manipulates the weave through song, which is why a Bard spell casting focus tends to be a musical instrument. Alright, so as I was mentioning earlier, spells, they don't scale with character level, generally speaking. If you cast Burning Hands with a level 1 character with a level 1 slot, it's going to be the same as a level 19 character casting Burning Hands at level 1 with a level 1 slot. Except the difficulty class or DC may change because they have higher spellcasting ability. It's only cantrips that will scale because it's something you've learned from the get-go. For example, if when you first are able to cast a Firebolt, that character has used Firebolt hundreds and hundreds of times by the time they've reached level 10, level 11. So the Firebolt gets more and more powerful. 1d10, 2d10, 3d10. That's how it's reflected in game. With Tasha's edition, it can be changed at every ability score increase level. And most of these classes will only get it every 4 levels. With the new AL ruling, you can change it between sessions if you like. But this is the general flavor, so especially in consideration for those of you who do play home games, that's what cantrips are. And cantrips are a little bit special to me, especially for every character, because they tell you what this character has specialized in and can always rely on, even if they are completely out of juice. You can, of course, power up with certain spells when you use a higher level spell slot to cast that spell, and depending on the spell, sometimes it does more damage, it will have a longer duration, it will affect more targets. The spell usually tells you how it scales. If the spell does not scale, that is it. You don't get any benefit from upcasting the spell. Okay, right. And the next part of basics that I'll go through a little bit is spells, they generally have a cast time, which is usually an action, but can be a bonus action, or a reaction, or even a few minutes, or even a few days, or hours. A range. Range is where you can cast a spell, or sometimes you'll see the range of touch, which requires your caster to touch the target, or the range of self. When the range is self, that is almost always a spell that buffs your character to do something. So the classic example is the various smites that a paladin get. For example, Thunder Smite. He causes his weapon to have a thunderous energies enveloping it before he next attack, and when he attacks, it unleashes that power, dealing extra damage and causing the enemy to perhaps fall prone. A duration, depending on the spell, sometimes you need to concentrate to maintain the duration. It's always listed in the spell details page. I'd like to highlight one particular ruling that I see a lot of people get wrong, which is the bonus action spells. So, bonus action spells, this is a rule that's quite obscure. You have to flip through the PHP to quite a late in the book, and you'll see that bonus action spells have a special clause. Before or after using a bonus action spell, you can't cast another spell during the same turn. For the whole turn, you are unable to cast anything except for cantrips with a cast time of 1 action. Right, I'd like to take a pause here and see is everyone okay so far. Let me just ping out the name and see. Okay, let's see. I have Ching.
No questions, thank you.
All right, very good. Okay, so if there are no questions, I guess I'll go forward. And the next thing I'd like to share about is spell components. Spell components is every spell, when you look at them through the books or in an online setting, through D&D Beyond, for example, you'll see that they have various components to them. Verbal, which means that you need to chant mystic words to manipulate the weave. Advent, let me ask you a quick question and see whether you're able to answer this correctly. Advent, can you cast a spell while underwater?
Underwater? I think yes.
That is correct. You can cast a spell underwater. You don't have to specifically say any language to be able to cast a spell. Casting a spell underwater, however, has other problems, which is you're no longer holding your breath. So the DM can and probably will start counting down your breath timer. There is such a thing as suffocation rules in D&D, so he may start to do that already. Okay, next, somatic components. A lot of spells have a somatic component where your right hand, for example, any free hand is needed to do Naruto poses, basically, to do somatic gestures that is necessary to enact the spell's effects. And last but not least is the material component. Somatic and material, they go hand in hand because of the next few rulings. And this one, a lot of people do get mistaken quite often. So, most spells actually require a material. So, for example, a fireball needs a little bit of bat guano, bat poop, basically, to be used as a material catalyst. You can replace any component that doesn't have a cost by using a spellcasting focus, for example, a rod, or to buy a component pouch. So these are items you can buy at any time from the PHP in an AL setting, and it's very important to remember that not all spellcasters can use a spellcasting focus. Now, why do I say this is because two particular subclasses, the Eldritch Knight and the Arcane Trickster, actually can't use a spellcasting focus, which means they need to have a component pouch with them. And when the spell requires a material component, your free hand needs to also handle the component throughout the casting. If the spell has both a somatic and material component, you don't need two free hands to handle the material and the somatic gestures, because the same hand can be used to handle the somatic and material component. It gets a bit iffy when the spell does not have a material component, however. If the spell is verbal and somatic only, that will require you to have a free hand available to cast the spell. And I'll give you an example later, and we'll see how everyone answers this. Alright. If the material listed in the spell, for example, in Identify, you need to actually have that item on the PC, and sometimes it's consumed, sometimes it's not. The classic spell that consumes your material components would be items such as spells such as Revivify, where you have to use a 300 GP diamond to revive something that died in the last minute, as long as the creature, the soul, is willing. For Identify, if you have that 100 GP pearl, I believe, in your inventory, you need to handle it throughout the casting of Identify to be able to use that spell. So especially for example, a Forge Cleric always has Identify ready. And someone at the table says, I would like to use Identify on ritual casting it. Okay, do you have the material component? No. Then, basically speaking, by the rules, they aren't able to use Identify. Some DMs do hand wave this, although I find that it's quite an integral part of a spellcaster balance, especially later when we talk about using a shield in particular. Alright, so one of the other things that you need to consider for spells is the concept of concentration. Some spells, they need the spellcaster to concentrate on the spell. This is actually a new addition to the 5th edition of D&D, and it's a brilliant idea, if I may say so myself, because what it does is it forces you to have a risk-reward system to cast powerful spells. When you cast a spell such as Bless, I'm sure all of you know how Bless works, and it's very potent. A 1d4 to every attack roll and every saving throw is going to save your ass so many times. But concentration spells, they're known to be very, very powerful, and so D&D itself discourages any kind of homebrew to allow a spellcaster to concentrate on 2 spells at the same time, because it is that powerful. When it comes to concentration spells, for example, you're concentrating on Bless, you can decide that, oh, I would like to stop concentrating at any time, even during an opponent's turn, even during your friend's turn, even during your turn, to stop the effect of the spell. For example, if there's no longer any enemies inside, a large AoE, you may choose to stop concentrating. Or if you decide to use another concentration spell, for example, if let's say you're using Greater Invisibility, you're invisible now, you can also cast spells that don't require concentration. But right before your enemy strikes your teammate who is about to go down, you decide that it's time to use Hold Person. Your invisibility breaks the instant you begin casting a Hold Person, and that will try to take place if the enemy passes or saves their wisdom saving throw. Alright. When you do a concentration spell, you need to consider that the risk reward is there. It's a very powerful spell. But smart enemies may decide that, oh, it's time to hit the spellcaster who just chanted out a verbal component of a spell, and now there's a visible shroud of magic around me. I know that that is the spellcaster. I'm going to target him to disrupt the spell. So there's 2 main ways that concentration can be broken. The first one is damage. Usually the DC is either 10 or higher if you've taken a lot of damage. So let's say Dragon uses his lightning breath on you. It does 60 damage. The DC for that, the con save DC, is actually going to be 30 because it did 60 damage to you. And that's not achievable by most PCs in any circumstance except for maybe if you have a paladin and you're a proficient in con saving throws. So it's usually 10, for example, if you take very little big plinks of damage. If the enemy hits you for 1 damage, the DC is still 10. And if the enemy hits you 5 times, you have to roll 5 constitution saving throws to see if you manage to maintain your concentration. It's something that DMs would appreciate if you remind them, oh, DM, my spell is a concentration spell. I need to roll a con saving throw every time you hit me. So just let them know. It's sometimes very difficult to track in the heat of things when we're controlling 20 to 30 creatures. It's also good for you to just recognize that this is the limits of the spell. And something that a lot of people don't play much in the games that I see and played in is A concentration saving throw, a constitution save for a concentration spell, can also be triggered by an environmental factor. So, for example, the character's in a typhoon, there's no damage taken, but he is swirling in midair. I would say, it's kind of hard to concentrate on the spell, and I could ask him to roll a Constitution saving throw to see if he manages to maintain that spell. So this really depends on the DM, and certain feats can help with this, noticeably Warcaster. Warcaster is a feat that is pretty good for most spellcasters. Again, I won't be going too much into feats today, but do recognize that there's two semi-specific ways to disrupt concentration. There's, of course, other ways, for example, to stun the spellcaster, for example, to dispel the magical effect. The spellcaster basically doesn't need to concentrate on it anymore and will probably stop concentrating on it. Okay, and I think this is the last of part 1, which is readying spells. Normally when you ready an action, you need to specify a trigger. And then after specifying the trigger, if it happens, you can decide whether you want to enact upon your prepared action. With a spell, it's a little bit different. With a spell, once you ready your action to prepare a spell, your character is considered to be concentrating on that spell. And what does that mean? It means that A, you cast a spell on your turn. Your spell slot is expanded during your turn. And B, because you begin to concentrate on casting even if it is a non-concentration spell, your previous concentration spell goes poof immediately. This is because you have to concentrate and be ready to use it at the snap of a finger once you see the trigger. So, because you use your spell slot on your turn, if it doesn't get triggered by your next turn, the spell slot is already expanded. You can't take it back. This is something that you do need to keep in mind when you prepare to use a spell. It takes up your action and reaction, but it can be a very powerful tool. Alright, so any questions so far? Let me try with, let's see, Isan. Oh, Isan.
Yes, what?
Any questions?
No, I was just looking.
DC 30, yeah. If it's DC 30, you basically don't need to roll. In most cases, in some cases, still can pass, especially if you have things like Bless or Bardic Inspiration. Yeah, so Dolly, if you ready a spell, it is exactly like concentrating on a spell. For example, if I am a Warlock, I've used Hex, that is a concentration spell. When you concentrate on Hex, and then let's say I want to prepare an Eldritch Blast. I have to concentrate on Eldritch Blast despite it being a cantrip. I have to stop concentration on Hex. This is by the rules how it's supposed to go on. It's something that it may or may not come up very often, but it's good to know. Alright, so let's see. Let's ping you all a question and see how you all answer this. This is the spell called Shield. Everyone should kind of know this. It's a very basic spell, first level. When something hits you, you have +5 bonus to your AC, which also guards against the triggering attack, and if it was a magic missile, you take 0 damage. Okay, so question for all of you. I am an Eldritch Knight. Let's say level 3. I'm currently equipping a longsword and a shield. An opponent goblin hits me with the sling. Let's say it's about 21 to hit. If I use shield, my AC will jump up to 23. Can I use shield as a reaction for this? Let's try Zach.
I would say no, because it needs a verbal and somatic component.
Okay.
He's already holding a longsword and a shield, so I don't know, it might be wrong.
Okay, very good. So let's try someone else and see if they are able to answer this. Let's go with Chris. Chris, you there? Yeah, Chris with the dog picture. Hi. Do you think you're able to cast this, yes or no? Chris, you think can, yeah? Why is that? Okay, so Chris, so we've got two answers, and that's a very good thing. Alright, so the correct answer ding, 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 is Zach's answer. You're right, Zach, so I'll be proud. It's because your hand that's holding a sword and a shield, an Eldritch Knight cannot use a spellcasting focus. So I've mentioned this earlier. If the spell was a verbal, somatic, and material, perhaps he could handle a material component with his free hand, but he does not have a free hand at the moment because he's using a longsword and a shield. So by right, this spell cannot be used as a reaction. It's something a lot of DMs don't pay particular attention to, but it is something that incentivizes players to choose specific feats. So one of the key ones that I like to talk about is actually Warcaster. Warcaster, the thing that most people take it for is actually the first bullet point. You have advantage on Constitution saving throws that you make to maintain your concentration on a spell when you take damage. Remember the alternate condition I mentioned earlier, being thrown in a typhoon. If the DM deems that that is a necessary timing to tell you, okay, make a con save, see if you're able to concentrate on this spell, if, for example, if you've been chucked into a whirlpool. But the second part is, you can perform the somatic components of spells even when you have weapons or shield in one or both hands. Which means that, in the earlier example, if you have Warcaster, you are able to cast Shield despite having a longsword and a shield in both hands. Alright, so very good job to you, Zach. And yes, no wonder Warcaster, you're right. Okay, sure. So, now, next question. The same Eldritch Knight. He's now level 10. He's taken the above feat. He casts Shadow Blade as a bonus action. He attacks with it twice with his action. He uses Action Surge. And then he uses Burning Hands with his new action. He runs away, but then he gets hit. So he uses Shield to prevent himself getting hit in the same turn before deciding to use, okay, this is dangerous, I'm going to Misty Step out. So he, with his new bonus action that's granted by Misty Step, he decides to make his way out. Are there any issues spotted in the above statement? Let's go with Evan?
I think for one turn can only cast one spell, right? So,
That is a common misconception. So you're saying that one turn can only cast one spell? Don't worry, I'll address that a little bit later, but semi-correct. I'll give you a half point for that. Anyone else would like to try and tell me what is wrong with this statement?
I can give it a go.
Sure, go ahead. I believe that's the keen bean.
Yeah. I think you can't attack with Shadow Blade twice.
You can. You can. So Shadow Blade is a pretty special spell. Shadow Blade is a buff that creates a shadowy sword in one hand, and you can use it as a weapon. Most spells don't do this, but Shadow Blade is a very particularly strange spell. That's why it's quite popular on Eldritch Knights, who do need to use their extra attack as much as they want to, because they will sooner or later get 4 attacks per action.
Okay.
So they can actually attack with it twice. Nice try, nice try.
Yeah.
Alright, let me try with KD is here. Haha, KD. KD?
Too many bonus actions.
Yeah, right. So that's the immediate thing that I will highlight the next, which is too many bonus actions. Action Search. This is a side segue to this spellcasting workshop. Action Search only gives you 1 extra action. How do you have 2 bonus actions? Who knows? So a lot of people do make the mistake that, oh, I'm a spellcaster, I'm going to multi-class into a fighter, get Action Search, and have an extra action and bonus action, and able to use Shadow Blade and then Burning Hands and, attack and Misty Step. That's far too many bonus actions. That's correct. Alright, I'll try with one more before I reveal what is it that I'm trying to highlight in particular. Let's see, Kazuki. I think that's a new name here. Hello, Kazuki. Okay, no worries. Let's try Dolly then. Oh, Dolly, you here? Yep. The question on the screen. What? Ah, okay, Dolly. The question on the screen. What exactly is the issue with this statement? The one here. Cast Shadow Blade, use burning, attacks with it twice. Action Surges, uses Burning Hands. Gets hit, uses Shield, and then decides to use Misty Step again. So one thing that was mentioned is he doesn't have another bonus action despite using Action Surge. Because Action Surge does not give you a bonus action, it just gives you one additional action. So what else do you think is the problem with this statement? Okay, so no, that's incorrect, Dolly. Action Surge can be used to cast spells. Sure, go ahead, Chris. Shadow Blade is a second level spell and is used as a cantrip. Sorry, it's a second level spell used as a bonus action. Mm-hmm. Okay, no worries. So, I'll reveal the answer. Everything about this statement is wrong after the action surge. Every single thing. You can cast Shadow Blade on your turn as a bonus action. Attack with it twice with your action. Not an issue, because Shadow Blade is special. It creates a shadowy blade, which can be used as a weapon. Action Surge, and then using Burning Hands. Remember earlier I was sharing about the bonus action special clause? He's used his bonus action to cast Shadow Blade. His entire turn, he can no longer cast any other spells except for cantrips, with a cast time of 1 action. So, with his new action, he could attack again, or he could cast, for example, Firebolt. Not an issue. But he cannot cast Burning Hands, because that is another leveled spell. And he cannot use his reaction to cast Shield, because that is again another leveled spell. It's not a cantrip. And of course, the Misty Step, has already been addressed earlier. He does not have another bonus action, even if he has Action Surge, because he only gets 1 additional action. Everything in this statement is wrong after the attacks with it twice and Action Surge. Yep. Okay, no worries. It's something that a lot of, even DMs, I find a lot of DMs don't fully understand. Oh, what does the bonus action rule mean? So when you put it into this kind of context, it becomes a little bit more digestible. I'll be sharing a later example that it is possible to cast 2 leveled spells in a turn, and that helps to address some of the misconceptions. Advent, earlier you mentioned on that. Actually, you can. It just needs different triggers that is not using your bonus action. As long as you don't use your bonus action anywhere in your turn, you can use 2 leveled spells. So, for example, if this Eldritch Knight wants to use Burning Hands, Action Surge Burning Hands, he can. That is not an issue. That is completely fine. Alright. Next question. This is a favorite spell of many DMs and a spell that some other DMs completely hate. I hate this spell. But it is a very necessary spell, especially when you fight any kind of spellcaster. It's Counterspell. Counterspell. Right. Here's the situation. A wizard prepares to use Hold Person. So you've run into a room, he prepares to use Hold Person, and the trigger is a hostile creature, who he knows he's been running from, walks into the room. The enemy creature that walks in is a wizard. He walks into the room, opens the door, and hold up! And it is at that moment the trigger goes off. The player says, aha, I used my prepared action to use Hold Person on this person. Initiative is rolled at that point. So, anyone can tell me what is wrong with the above scenario. Let me see. Okay. There's a new Oh, I won't ask Denon because he just dialed in. Let's see. Hello. Let's try with a you, Noaz. Noaz, you just joined us.
Yeah, what's up?
Yep. All right. So, thank you for joining today's Spellcaster workshop. Very happy to see a new face here. I don't think I've played any games with you yet. Hoping to play one of you soon. But for today's Spellcaster workshop, I've posed a question. Where do you think is the issue with this? Is there anything wrong with the above scenario?
To be honest, I don't know.
No worries. That's exactly what today's workshop is all about. So let's try someone else. And Blindy. I know you don't play spellcasters, but try and see. Come on, do Blindy. No idea. Fine, let me ask a seasoned spellcaster. Isan! Oh, Isan.
Yes.
What do you think is the issue with this situation? Is there any issue with this situation?
Um, should the wizard who came into the room have a reaction because it's surprise?
Well, in this situation, so yes, that's actually one of the qualifying factors that disallows him from counterspelling. But in this situation where the wizard is chasing the party and the party closed the door, so he ran into the door ready to smack them, he's not surprised. So anything that, I mean, it could be a fixed scenario, there could be nothing wrong with this scenario.
If he's not surprised, I don't think anything's wrong.
Haha. Right. So the issue here is counterspell's cast time requires you to take your reaction when you see a creature casting a spell. What does this mean for prepared action? Remember earlier I shared that you cast the spell on your turn. It is no longer a valid target for counterspell by right. Many DMs possibly don't know this, but it is something that's very interesting because the requirement for counterspell is to cast it when you see someone cast a spell. The spell has already been cast during your ally wizard's turn. Only the trigger, the reaction, happens during your opponent's turn. He cannot counterspell that by the rules. So this is a very interesting scenario for counterspell. Another interesting scenario that I have for counterspell. All of you would be familiar with the spell of the feat Spell Sniper, which doubles the range of a spell. And yes, Dolly, there is a hold person as well as hold monster. Yeah, I believe it's hold monster spell. So one will hold a humanoid, the other one will hold a creature. So here is a question for all of you. How does Spell Sniper interact with Counterspell? Spell Sniper is a feat that will double the range of any spell. Let me see. If we're quiet, then if we're quiet, then kena layu.
Yeah.
How does Spell
It's
Sniper
like
affect?
my lecturer calling me out. Oh no.
Oh yes. No worry, today is a no pressure situation.
Yes.
Any answer you give also, I'll just tell you the right answer at the end. So
I mean, the spell sniper says like when you cast a spell that requires an attack roll. It says attack roll, right? Yeah.
let me just ping it.
When you cast a spell that requires you to make an attack roll, the spell's range is double. Therefore, if it's a counter spell, it's not an attack roll.
Exactly. So spells as well as feats, they're all very, very specific. Some DMs may forget the fact that you need an attack roll. But another thing that the DM may or may not realize is that regardless of what they do, the condition does not double in range, which you take when you see a creature within 60 feet of you casting a spell. It is perhaps an oversight, but unfortunately that's how it's written. So regardless of how you try to boost this range, perhaps you're a sorcerer, you know, you have one of those meta magics that will boost the range. No matter what you do, you still need to be within 60 feet of the creature, because that is the prerequisite to actually casting the spell. It's not just the reaction. So some spells will have special conditions. Every spell is different. And so it's good to ping it to your DM, because in the heat of things, you know, perhaps you rule it fine or whatever, because that keeps the game running, keeps people's blood pumped up, it keeps the session going, it helps to end that nice combat that you've been waiting for the entire session. Alright, so I think the next portion is going to be something very relevant for all of us who are stuck in lockdown or mostly playing online games. Online Etique for Roll20. There's so many spells in the game. There's hundreds of spells and features. Nobody, even if they spent years trying to memorize the PHB, the DMG, the Xanatas, blah 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 blah, nobody is ever going to memorize everything. And remember what I said earlier, nobody truly knows all of the rules of D&D. If it happens on the spot and they ruled it that way, it's probably for the better of the enjoyment of the players so that the game keeps running. So help your DM out with a few of these tips. These are things that I find when I'm a player helps my DM out quite a bit. So I thought that, you know, it's good to share with all of you, just so that your DM has less burden when he runs a session, because he may have to juggle NPCs, the background, initiative, battle, music, setting, a lot of things. This just generally helps to keep the flow going. So the first things first is ping your spell on D&D Beyond. For those of us who are using D&D Beyond and the Beyond 20 application, there's a very handy button, Cast. And what it does is, for example, Fireball, when you press Cast, it will minus off your spell slot and it will do the 8d6 damage. Automatically calculates for you. Very handy for a player. But let's say you're a DM and you have no idea how the spell Fireball works. First of all, you need to know how the spell Fireball works. But second of all, to help your DM, you really should help to ping the what does the spell do? Because there's a nifty little button in, for example, every spell, Healing Word, display on virtual tabletop. This really helps your DM at a glance see most of this information. One bonus action, and it will heal 1d4 plus the spellcasting modifier. So that just generally, especially for high level spells, because not all of us play high level spellcasters. Once you have helped your DM to ping that spell, he can look on it, judge it on the spot. If, for example, it's a spell you've cast 20-30 times with the same DM, you probably don't need to ping it. Or perhaps you haven't played this character for a while, perhaps you want to ping it once or twice. But this helps keep the flow where the DM is like, oh, what does that spell do again? You know, you automatically pick, it's like, oh, DM, I would like to use Healing Word on my downed ally. So probably he knows Healing Word, but just ping it for him, because him or her, and he'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, I remember. Healing Word is a bonus action. Oh yeah, you've used your bonus action. You can't use your any other spell except cantrip this turn. So this is something good, and if you can replicate it for features, it's also something your DM 100% will appreciate, trust me, because nobody remembers every single class, especially with Pashas now being a legal resource for historic games. It's something that truly helps your DM just to understand your class, your spells a little bit better to keep things flowing well. Okay, second thing. I think this is very important, especially for most spellcasters. Most spellcasters have area of effect spells, which I will shorten to AoEs from now moving forward. Help your DM by using the draw shape function on Roll20. Now, there's two key ones that I want to remind everyone, which is to hold the shift button. When you use the shift button, you click draw shape, and then you drag. Before you start dragging your mouse to create, for example, a tidal wave, which is 30 feet times 10 feet, you hold the shift button so that it will snap to the grid, which means it is forced to be 5 feet fat. It helps a lot for lightning bolt, it helps a lot for tidal wave, and for example, if you want to use a spherical spell like Fireball or Shatter, instead you hold the alternate button, and then before you start dragging your mouse, that will help you create a circle on Roll20. So this helps you because you are able to drag that particular shape you drew to wherever you want to drop it on the enemies, you know, immediately, rather than DM, I would like to drop it in the middle of the enemy. Which enemies? You know, the three shadow demons. Yes, there's 10 shadow demons at the moment. Which 3 shadow demons do you mean? That one on my right. Okay, I'll try my best. You know, it just helps the DM to visualize where exactly you want to drop the spell. Okay, and then this is a quick reminder on how to determine the spell AoEs. Okay, sure, Cheng, thanks for dialing in. And how to determine the size of the AoE? There's a few different shapes and sizes of spells. A cone, as a reminder, the maximum width should be equal to the length. If it's 15 foot fat, if it's 15 foot length, it should be 15 foot fat at maximum. A cube. A cube's surface you should select the point of origin where it's anywhere on the cube's surface. It can be a corner, it can be one of the flat surfaces of cube, but the point of origin needs to be selected anywhere within the range of the spell. So for example, the spell has a range of 60 feet. As long as one of the sides is within that 60 feet, you can technically extend the range of, for example, Entangle by a few extra feet, because you select the point of origin within the cast point. Alright, and Entangle is a square rather than a cube, but it follows the same principle where the square targets the floor. A cylinder will affect everything at the bottom and the top of the cylinder as well in D&D. So the point of origin is the circle, it extends to another circle and a straight line. And line and sphere, I believe I don't have to explain too much. A line is a line, it could be a wall, or it could be a sphere, which is a 3D structure of a circle. Okay, Q&A. Why on earth? Okay, so my configuration has gone funky. But anyways, for this Q&A, I'm going to highlight a first level spell called Thunderwave. Thunderwave is a spell with a range of self and an area of 15 feet. So everyone can reply to me, which ones do they think is the right orientation of the spell Thunderwave? A for the left, B for the middle, and C for the right. C in the picture here is the location of the caster. Originally this was a picture of something else, but to avoid copyright, I put it with a generic C. So Chris says A, and the other Chris says B, Isan says A, B, B, all B and C. Okay, good enough. So the only one who answered this correctly is, of course, KD. A is not a possible configuration unless you're aiming it on top of your head, because you need to select a point of origin on the cube's sides. So this, you can refer back to the PHP. The rule on the selecting the sides is actually in the PHP and something that not many people recognize. People all think that Thunderwave is something that shoots up from the caster, and I don't blame them because this spell is worded very strangely. But because of the cube casting rules, it is the more correct term for Thunderwave is actually adjacent Thunder Cube, where you cast the cube adjacent to your character. B and C is the right orientations. A, you can cast it on top of you, but not on the same area that you're in. You literally can't hit yourself with it. Or you shouldn't. Maybe your DM would allow it as a rule of cool or rule of silly. But yes, this is one of the spells that I find a lot of people get mistaken. Okay, next. Another favorite spell, Burning Hands. First level spell. I'm sure all of you have seen this one in particular. It's a cone spell. So Burning Hands, what is the right configuration here? Is it A? Is it C? Is it B? Is it C? Let me see what you all think. Alright, so this one's a lot more straightforward. Basically, yes, it is mostly C. Some DMs may rule B, but this is highly DM dependent. In most situations, assume it is C. The 15 feet of range should be equivalent to its width, its fatness. So depending on DM, I rule it is if the creature is in these spaces, they will also get hit. If the creature is, for example, here, definitely not. Here, definitely yes. So it should affect this range. And earlier, remember when I told you how to draw your shapes? To draw this, you use the polygon function on Roll20. And then after that, you can rotate this so that you are able to tell your DM, okay, this is exactly where I want to place my burning hands. It really helps them to visualize and eliminates any kind of a question on where you want to burn your enemies the best. Alright, so very good. And let's see. I'm actually nearing the end of my workshop, so there's only about 4 or 5 more slides. Next thing, common misconceptions. Okay, the first one I believe has already been addressed today. So, someone of you mentioned, you cannot cast more than 1 leveled spell per turn. This is absolutely wrong. Let's give you an example. I'm a tiefling, and I'm, let's just say, a cleric. Okay, so I decide to use a inflict wounds because the enemy is next to me. It misses, so I decide that, you know, I'm in deep shit. I would like to run away. I run away. The enemy takes the opportunity attack, it hits. Can I use Hellish Rebuke as a reaction? Hellish Rebuke comes from being a tiefling. So, everyone in the chat, yes or no? Can I use Hellish Rebuke in this turn? Very good. Very good. Haha, Evan still don't know. If the enemy is small enough, Zach, I'll say tak kena lah. Yep, so very good. All of you answered this correctly. Yes, they can. And the main reason is because I did not use a bonus action spell. If I use a bonus action spell anywhere in this turn, I can't use any other level spell in this turn. Let me give you the example of Shillelagh. Shillelagh is a bonus action cantrip for a druid. It basically buffs the weapon so that it hits based on the wisdom modifier. That is a cantrip, but it still takes a bonus action. However, because you've used your bonus action to cast a spell, for the rest of your turn, you cannot cast any other spell except a cantrip with a cast time of 1 action. It's a very... some DMs don't like this rule and just hand wave it away. I find that it's a very important balancing tool, especially for sorcerers. Sorcerers can get very out of hand, clerics can get very out of hand if you allow them to spam anything they want in the same turn. Okay, right, so... Yep, Cornelius, I think you just asked, you can't, because you've used a bonus action to cast a spell, the cantrip. And... okay... alright. So, the next one. If I bless my ally, and then my paladin is next after me, he also blesses that ally. Oh, it's amazing, it'll stack. They'll get to add 2d4 to their attack roll. Any of you have had these thoughts, especially when you've played a spellcaster? And Dolly, nope, cannot, because as long as you use your bonus action for any spell, including a cantrip, the rest of your turn cannot be used to cast any other level spell. It can only be used to cast cantrips. With a cast time of 1 action. Very specific. I don't know why, but that is the rule. I see Evan typing, so I want to see what he says about the second bullet point. Although I think one of the other DMs in this server has brought it up in game before. Yep, Evan, so your question, if you cast haste to get bonus AC, the next turn, or during your opponent's turn, something hits you, use your reaction for shield. It will stack, that's not an issue. For this particular bullet point, if you bless your ally and another paladin blesses them, spells with the same name cannot stack. Features with the same name cannot stack. Only the stronger one takes effect. So in this case, only 1 bless will take effect, whichever was cast with a higher level spell slot. So, for example, if you're double blessed by an ally, at most you get to add a 1d4 to your attack roll. Features with the same name, Noah. So, if for example, you use a bless. So this example is bless. Features, for example, if 2 monsters have the same feature, let's just say the feature's name is charm. Alright, let's say 2 succubuses, one charms you, the second one charms you. And are you under the effect of both of the charms? You're not, actually. You'll only be under the effect of the second charm. And yes, Katie, thank you very much for pointing out the area of effect for the squares and hexes. Yep, if it's circular and covers at least half a square, it affects that square. Okay, thank you very much. That's also something I didn't know. See, you learn everything. You learn something new every day with D&D. Some things I know, some things I won't know until people raise it up. So that's a good thing. Thanks very much, Katie. But yes, someone just got charmed to run away. So for example, if a spell was used to, let's say charm person was used on you, you're like, oh, buddy with this guy, but an ally decides to, because he has no other spell slot available, he decides to charm person you as well. Do you suddenly become friends to both of them? You don't. Spell effects cannot stack, especially if they have the same name. This is what we call combining magical effects. You can check your PHP, it is there as well. So another example is, for example, if you use a AoE that has 2 same names. Let's give an example, Wall of Fire. You know, it's a Wall of Fire. If you stand in 2 Wall of Fire, do you take both the damage? You don't, actually. Will only take in, because they trigger both at the start of your turn. Sorry, at the end of your turn. They both trigger. So, because they trigger at the same time, you only take the one that affects you the most. The stronger effect, basically. So let's say one does 40 damage, one does 25 damage. The one that's 40 damage will take precedence and will affect the character, rather than you take 65 damage. Alright, and then the third bullet point. I want to cast Hex as a Sword and Shield Hexblade Paladin, multi-class. So Hex is a Warlock spell, and this character is a multi-class Hexblade and Paladin. He says, my shield has my spellcasting focus, a holy emblem drawn on it, and I have Warcaster. I can surely cast Hex, right? The answer here is actually no, they can't. Because a spellcasting focus for one class does not translate to a spellcasting focus for the other class. Your Holy Emblem will help you cast Paladin spells, no issue. It cannot be used to replace the material component of Hex for a Warlock. So that would mean that unless this Hexblade also has Improved Pact Weapon, which is an invocation that makes the weapon spellcasting focus, they cannot use the spellcasting focus of the Paladin to cast Hex. Again, this is something that some DMs do handwave. I do find that it's very important to make sure that these things are put in place, because it's really only going to affect characters that use a shield. And these characters, compared to most casters, have a higher AC. So this is the balancing point for them. Alright. So, let me see, Dolly. Bonus action spell plus cantrip, yes. Bonus action cantrip plus spell, no. Bonus action cantrip plus cantrip, yes. That's exactly correct, Dolly. That is the rule itself. Even if you action search, even if you do something else, that is the exact rule. Alright. And the last one. I want to cast this spell in front of the NPC and get a surprise attack in. This one is something you probably do see quite often. I want to cast this spell, DM. Whole person. What is the correct response for the DM in this case? It's not you immediately get a surprise round. It is roll initiative. He may be surprised, he may not be surprised, depending if his initiative is before or after you. But you can use your action to use whole person on that NPC. So, especially like, remember every spell tends to have a verbal component. Even if they don't have a verbal component, they probably have a somatic component. Which means that even if you're dead silent about it, they will see you doing your Naruto gestures. It is noticeable. People know you're casting a spell. And casting a spell, depending on how the DM rules it, everyone knows it's kind of dangerous, so people will be on guard. In most cases, it may or may not result in a surprise for that enemy. Again, to make it more fair, some DMs will just ask you to roll initiative. If they beat you in initiative, perhaps they send the first turn surprise, but perhaps they don't. I don't know what is that link, Cornelius, so I'll check it out later. But yes, KD and Dolly, roll initiative is the correct response. Unless unless it logically makes sense that they can't hear you. So, classic example, Hex, the range is 90 feet. If, for example, the guy is giving a speech in the middle of a busy town square, and you hex him so that his charisma is debuffed, so that his speech suddenly becomes less charismatic. You can do that. Your DM probably will ask you to do a skill check for it. So, for example, stealth or sleight of hand or arcana. Normally not arcana, but I've seen it happen because arcana is more knowledge. So, these are things that usually should happen. If your DM rules it a different way, just roll with it, man. See what they say. But by right, yes, you're supposed to roll initiative. Okay. So, last but not least, today's I don't know if you're all excited about this or the other portions of today's workshop. I hope you're excited for all of it. But let me share with you what I think about the various spellcasters in D&D 5e. So, spellcaster class breakdown. Generally speaking, you can divide most spellcasters into two broad categories. One are prepared spellcasters, which I've bolded above, Artificer, Ranger, Ranger. What the hell am I? Am I smoking? It's supposed to be Paladin. Give me a second. Okay, right. Sorry about that. And okay, so what is the difference between a prepared spellcaster as well as a known spellcaster? A prepared spellcaster is someone who, at the end of every long rest, can decide if they want to take new spells, according to what they know. Clerics and druids and paladins have access to their entire spell slots, spell list, because their powers are given to them either by the deity, by nature, or by their own strength of will in the case of paladins. For a wizard, they have to learn certain spells and put them in a spell book. They learn 2 spells every level, and then they have to decide to prepare a certain amount based on the int modifier and proficiency bonus to be ready for that day. So you have to prepare those spells for the day. For the other classes, they are known spellcasters, which means that they know a limited list of spells, and they will only be able to cast from this list of spells. They'll be able to change those spells every time they level up. One of the spells can be changed for another. In an AL setting, this has changed drastically because you can change spells between sessions, not an issue. In fact, for home games, if you tell your DM, DM, I'm not feeling this spell, you know, it's not working out how I want to. It's also a discussion you can have with the DM to see if he's willing to let you swap spells. For example, Thunder Wave. Perhaps you thought it was that AoE around you. You know, now that you know that it's a cube that's next to you, perhaps it's got less use than you originally thought. So you can tell the DM, and then he'll see, okay, yeah, maybe, you know, it makes sense. Go ahead, swap the spell. That's a DM thing that if they do allow that. But prepared spellcasters versus known spellcasters, one of the important things to know is that prepared spellcasters are more flexible, but are a lot harder because you need to suddenly know the entire spell list. And generally speaking, the burden of knowledge is quite high to play a prepared spellcaster. If you're not familiar with it, you may want to consider playing a known spellcasters because they have less spells to think about in the heat of battle. You have less decision paralysis, I would say. Okay, so end of the day, what do you want to? What should you play? Which is the most meta? What is the most min-max option? To me, I say play whatever you think is fun. If you think min-maxing is fun, play the class that you think will be, you know, the strongest in battle. If you think Bard is fun because you get to make dirty jokes at the table, or just make some stupid music or insult your enemy in the middle of battle, play that. Play what you think is fun. D&D is a game. Fun is the most important thing. Generally speaking, if you want to consider for the earlier classes, 1/3 or half casters, they are usually pretty good at other things as well. The Artificer has pages and pages of infusions to read through, so they've got a shit ton of utility there. Rangers and Paladins, they both have their own ability to stand in physical combat. 1/3 casters are actually mostly martial characters who stand in the middle of combat, but have spells to augment their abilities. Because prepared spellcasters, when you think about it, perhaps it is the objectively stronger choice when you know all of the spells. But knowing all the spells is a very daunting burden of knowledge for new players. If you're not familiar, again, consider bards or perhaps warlocks or perhaps a sorceress. And then, this is my personal opinion, so take with a pinch of salt or a heaping tablespoon of salt, whatever you feel like, whatever you're comfortable with, because this is truly how I feel about the classes. You may feel differently, every DM may feel differently about the different classes. So disclaimers said and done. This table, it continues on to the next slide, is how I feel about certain spellcasting classes. Now, the Sorcerer, I believe, is the hardest class to play by the rules. This is because of a few things. The first thing is, you have very few spells known. You have like, what, 10 or 11. You have less spells known than freaking the Warlock. So, you have a lot of cantrips known, but your actual level spells, you have very few. So you need to know what the hell you're doing when you want to play a Sorcerer. Because another thing is, Sorcerer's main gimmick for spellcasting is called meta magic. They can, for example, cause a spell to hit more than one enemy when it normally can only hit one enemy, or buff two allies when it can normally only buff one. The most famous example is Twinned Haste. You can imagine Twinned Haste on your freaking Paladin or Fighter or Ranger. You know, the nonsense they can do with one of them being hasted will probably make your DM cry. Imagine two of them and it's the same caster that can do that. That is perfectly fine. But it's something you need to have in mind when you originally pick a Sorcerer. Because when you get to level 5, you can only learn one level 3 spell and replace one of your current spells with another level 3 spell if you'd like. So you have very, very limited choices in terms of spells that you have. And your meta magic options, you have 2 options, which is select at level 3, which maintain all the way till level 10, I believe. So you're stuck with them all the way there. And if your DM doesn't allow you to remake, which is very common in most home D&D games, except for if the DM uses the Tasha's optional rules, yes, they can change it at level 4 and level 8. But that could take weeks or months to actually achieve in a home game. In an AL setting, I would say Sorcerer is easier to play compared to a Wizard, because you don't have to bother about the limited spell list. If you feel like changing because of the new unlimited rebuild rule, you can change it, not an issue. Alright, but played to their full potential, Sorcerers are the one spellcaster in this list that I believe is able to overtake the Wizard, because the Wizard is known to be omnipotent except for when it comes to healing, because they can use their bonus action to do things that the Wizard can never dream of, and on top of that, still use things with their main action. Whether it's using an item, whether it's using a cantrip, they can do more things than the Wizard can in a single turn, and that's something that you can boast about. Alright, so let me see if there's any... Everyone just fireball. PHP cut down as far as I can down. Bards are considered full spellcaster. Yep, Bards are considered full spellcasters because they have top tier versatility. I'll go on them in the next slide. And yeah, Tasha's subclasses are also very good for Bards because Tasha's subclasses have additional spells known most other classes don't have, sadly. Alright, then going on to Wizards. The Wizard players in today's channel would know that Wizards are the most money-hungry class in D&D. Full stop. You need money to succeed as a Wizard. You only learn 2 spells every level, unless you supplement it by buying scrolls, finding spell books, adding it to your own spell book, which costs money and costs a lot of time. In a home game campaign, maybe you do 5 quests and you only get 250 gold, and this is tier 2 or tier 3. It can happen because you take many sessions to finish one quest. So it's very different from a home game versus a AL game. An AL game, you get a shit ton of money, especially in tier 3. It may or may not be the case in a home game, depending on the loot table the DM has planned for you. So, however, with that, if you're able to, truly use your Wizard to their full potential, Wizards are by far the best spellcasting class in D&D. This is subjective. It's probably, a lot of players may understand when your Wizard gets to the 4th tier because you can do stuff no one else can, except probably the Sorcerer. And even when you say that, oh, damage, everyone should be damage. Sorcerers are very good at damage, Wizards are very good at damage. Something that's very, very good about Wizards is that most spellcasting classes, even if they're prepared spellcasters like Druids or Cleric, they have to prepare the ritual spell for the day. Let's say I want to prepare Detect Magic for Druids or Cleric to use as a ritual. I have to prepare it for the day. That takes up one of my slots. A wizard does not need to prepare it for the day. He can cast it from his spellbook, ritual cast it from his spellbook. Which means that he has everything prepared for the day, plus whatever's in his spellbook, if that spell is a ritual castable. So that is extreme utility on the wizard's end. Alright, then moving on to the druids. Druids and clerics, they are not going to be... they're really not going to do the big damage that a sorcerer or a wizard is going to do. So if your definition of playing spellcasters to do big damage, perhaps a druid or a cleric is not what you think about. Some subclasses will get a shit ton of damage or a shit ton of utility, so that may be more... that is something to consider. But generally speaking, they are very good to have in a party for healing purposes, utility purposes. Wizards don't get access to, for example, one of the best spells in the game, Pass Without Trace, which is a druid or ranger ability. Pass Without Trace gives you a flat +10 to stealth. It is amazing for basically everything because it's measured against a creature's perception or passive perception. A +10 bonus is very hard to beat, full stop. It's like a bardic inspiration for your entire team at very high levels, and everyone's rolling 10 and above. You know, you can imagine just how crazy that is. So, generally speaking, they have very powerful support and utility spells. They're not going to do as much damage as a wizard, who is going to be throwing a fireball at level 5 onwards, and nonsense like Disintegrate when they get 6 level spell slots. Sorcerers will also be dealing shit ton of damage. Disintegrate, for example, on 2 targets, perfectly valid on sorcerers. And yeah, that is generally the flavor. Alright, and the last but not least are the last 2 spellcasters on the list, which is Bards and Warlocks. Bards are very, very, very good. I would say that Bards are the 4th easiest spellcaster class to learn, because for the first 10 levels, unless you're playing a Lore Bard, you only have access to Bard spells, which are mostly supportive in nature. But they get an ability called Magical Secrets, which means they can poach any spell from any other spellcaster class and use it as a Bard spell. That is insanely good. Lore Bards are notorious for, despite being one of the oldest subclasses in D&D, because they get additional magical secrets at level 6, they are known to be one of the best spellcasters in D&D simply because of their versatility. They can support, they can do damage, they can provide amazing utility when it's needed, they have bardic inspiration. Whatever you do, if you have a bard in your party, you're going to have a good time, I guarantee it. As long as the fellow spam says bardic inspirations post level 5. Alright, they have good crowd control, they can get good damage, they can get good support spells. You really will never have a bad time, especially because Bardic Inspiration works on saving throws. And then, to me, the easiest spellcaster class to learn is actually Warlocks. Why? Very simple. From level 1 to level 10, you have 2 spell slots. End of story. You do good damage, or you can do good utility, but you'll only be able to do it twice until you get a short rest. So Warlocks, I would say, despite them being slightly easy to learn, they have a... mechanically, they're easy to learn because they get certain invocations that they can cast. For example, Mage Armor at will. You don't have to take a spell slot for that. Disguise Self at will. Detect Magic at will. It's very powerful and very high utility. But it's very dependent on DM, because Warlocks, in home games especially, have the most storytelling baggage. Your powers are given to you by an otherworldly being. It depends on the DM on how much they want to play on it for that session. But it could really shake things up, especially if the campaign is a homebrew campaign, where story arcs can happen per character in the campaign, and it's either awesome or... no, it's usually awesome. It's almost never terrible. It's almost always awesome. Anyways, yes. So storytelling baggage is quite notable for Warlocks. The second thing is it's very DM dependent. Your enjoyment as a Warlock is directly proportional to the amount of short rests you get. So if you have no short rests, or your DM doesn't believe in short rests for whatever reason, don't play a Warlock. Play a full spell, any other full spellcaster, because I guarantee you, no matter how fun you find your Warlock character, end of the day, if you have another spellcaster in your group, you'll feel like you're second fiddle, because you have only 2 spell slots. It's either going to be used for utility or big damage when you really need the shit to happen. And with that, that is the end of my workshop today. I would like to remind everyone before I go into the next section, which is just a Q&A. Remember, never tell someone how to play D&D. You play how you want to, coordinate with your DM, if it's a home game especially. Pick what you want and pick what you think you'll have fun playing. Enjoy the magical world of D&D. There's a lot of things you can do with spellcasters, and just don't be afraid of it. If you're afraid of it, talk to your DM. Most of the AL DMs will be friendly, will be able to advise you on certain things that you're not familiar with, and help you play your character to the best that you want it to perform. And with that, everyone, I would like to say thank you very much for listening to me drone on for 1 hour and 20 minutes. Are there any questions? Go ahead and ask either in voice or in chat. I need to catch up with the 42 new messages. Give me a second. Yep, Dolly, you're correct. Warlock's being placed at the bottom because you have 2 spell slots. Let's see, GP, if okay, that's been answered by KD. The spellbook is encrypted because you have to rewrite it in your own language. Can you? So it's mostly on the spellbook. If you fall into yeah, actually that is quite common, Cornelius, about the DM ruling that your character fell into water. What is your book made of? Is it an enduring spellbook? Too bad. Cool DM will give you an enduring spellbook sooner or later. If he does plan to do all this bullshit. But it really depends on the style game that you agreed to when you signed up for his game. Keep your spell home game 2 wizards and cleric. I see a cleric experimenting spiritual weapon. Oh my god, when he was paralyzed. KD, you monster. Holy shit. And during spell will save you. Bars with music and puns. Elan the bar being Bahana. Bards are great. Bards are truly jack of all trades. They can do everything. I personally hate the eloquence subclass, but I'll keep that to myself. Forever 2 spells. Yeah, you're right, Katie. There's a funny thing, like, you know, in real games, especially when it's face to face, there's pack up the DM. You give them snacks. DM, do we have a short rest? Yes, you all have short rest. Nothing, absolutely nothing will disturb your short rest for this next hour as he munches on your Doritos or whatever. And Hexblade dips. Yeah, Hexblade dips depends on DM as well. Some DMs will need you to do RP to multi-class. That's also something very important. For example, I have told my players, I'll punish you if you are a paladin or freaking Torm and you say that you want to now worship a freaking Tiamat or something just to be a hexblade. And Sorlock, thanks. Okay, you're welcome. You're welcome, everyone. Enemy comes to counter spell. You're welcome, Keen Bean. Let's Christ. Thank you to Blindy. Beam me up. Scotty, unfortunately, we're actually at the end of today's session. So I've recorded this, but unfortunately, I have absolutely no idea if my recording went well. I'll have to see how it goes. If it went well, it's going to go on the Discord server. It's going to go on the YouTube channel. If it didn't, too bad lah. I tried. Let's see. Bring food to the table. If you have one hand free, Dolly, you can cast a spell without having more caster. If your hand is free and you can handle the somatic or material component. Yep, so Zach, when you have a class or a race that has a racial spell, you can never upcast the spell, full stop. So you will always cast it at whatever level it mentions. The example, for example, a Tiefling gets Hellish Rebuke cast at second level when they reach level 3. I can never upcast it. It's always going to be at second level. Yep, sure, no worries. Beam me up, Scotty. Hope you're able to catch the recap, or if my recording goes well, dear Lord. Cornelius, sometimes DMs don't allow you to drop or do free actions during someone else's turn. So this will highly depend on DM. Generally I'll say I'll allow my players to talk to each other or talk to the enemy as free actions during the enemy's turn. I would say that dropping a full weapon during the enemy's turn, if you want to do that, I'll say sure, but your enemy may take advantage of that. It really depends on the DM. Because by right, I want you to, as a player, to understand that when you end your turn, it may or may not have consequences. If you take that risk and you discuss with the DM that, yeah, sure, okay, I'll tell you that perhaps there is that risk that your enemy will steal your weapon. It's very likely because you just drop your +2 longsword, +3 longsword in his face. He's gonna pick that up, man. So Dolly, verbal somatic, no problem. Verbal somatic material. With your free hand, you can use that free hand to handle somatic and material components. Dolly, so not an issue. Picking up. Oh, this is another common misconception, but not really related to spellcasting. You don't need to use your free action. So when you drop an item, it's free. It doesn't take up your quote-unquote free action. It's completely free. You can drop it, and then with your object interaction, you can pick it up once as a free action, as a free thing you can do during your turn. For example, if you want to pick up 2 items, the second one requires your action, and that's how D&D structures it. Is 1 round is 6 seconds, so you have limited time, and extra attack, all that just means you're so inhumanly fast that you can attack twice. Yep, 1 object interaction per round, that's correct, Cornelius. And any other questions, keep them coming. I'll be just continuing to entertain this probably until like 10:10 or until I lose my voice. Yes, correct, Dolly. So if it's verbal somatic, you require what do you call it? Warcaster if you have a weapon and a shield in both hands. If, for example, you are playing a wizard and he only has a staff in one hand, he does not need Warcaster to cast a verbal somatic spell because his left hand, for example, is free. He can cast shield, verbal somatic. That part trips a lot of people up. Ruby of the War Mage is also very good. Yes, you can just make anything your spellcasting focus. It gets very nonsense when you have everything ready, but then your enemy attacks you. Do you have a sword and shield equipped? Yes, I do. Do you have Warcaster? No, you can't cast shield. Rules as written, you can't cast shield. Some DMs do hand wave it. I try to keep it rules as written as possible during my games to make sure that you know the risks and benefits of actually using a shield as a spellcaster. It gives you quick benefits, but it will have its own risks. As with anything in D&D, actions have consequences. Benefits might have their risks. Drop is free action, correct. Some DMs don't allow you to drop during your turn. I will say that if you do it, I allow it in my games, but I'll tell you as a caveat, if you do that, stuff may happen to your items. Hey, the wizard hat is amazing. What do you mean, Cornelius? Alright, so let me just ping. It's nerdy, but you're a wizard. You're nerdy by definition, and you play D&D. You're nerdy by definition as a player. Let me see who's been silent today. Denon, any questions? Yep, you.
I just got back.
What? I'm here pouring my heart out, and you didn't hear anything.
Yeah, because the toilet calls.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, while you are doing this, the slideshow, I'm making a fighter.
Okay, no worries.
Yes, I am defeating the purpose of the shit.
No worries. You play a pretty high level spellcaster, anyways. You would know most of this.
No, I'm still dumb. Don't worry.
No worries. Nobody truly knows all of the rules of D&D. Most DMs won't. And let's see. Chris, both of the Chris's. Any particular questions you'd like to ask? Okay, very good, very good. How about you, Robert? I think you haven't spoken much this session. Or Zach? Zach, you have any other questions besides the Janasi thing? For you, because I know you play 4 Elements Monks, do also note that some subclasses, they say you cast a spell, you are still casting the spell, so it follows all of the rules that I've mentioned today. A lot of DMs allow because Dolly, you only need 2 hands to attack with the two-handed weapon. You don't need 2 hands to hold the weapon. Yep, so a lot of DMs will allow you to have a free hand available to cast a somatic component. So I do allow that in my games, especially for example if you play an Eldritch Knight with a two-handed weapons. You don't need both your hands on the Great Sword at all times. If you decide to cast it, I'll look at you. You're not wearing a shield, fine, go ahead. Not a problem. If it's a material component, maybe a bit dicier, yes, because you need to handle a spellcasting focus. If you are able to handle spellcasting focus, or if you need a material. You're right. So shield is the main example. These things, sometimes it feels like nonsense until it comes to the situation and you're like, that's why. Alright, if my cleric wants to cast Resurrection on a dead ally who is just released from Soul Cage. Okay, so this is something I've never done before. I need to see what the Soul Cage do. Wow, it's long. While a soul is trapped, so if the soul is not trapped anymore, they should be valid for reviving unless the soul is not willing. So resurrection depends on the resurrection spell as well, because for example Revivify will no longer work because he's been dead for longer than 1 minute. Wild Magic Sorcerer in AL, very safe. Very, very safe. Wild Magic Sorcerer is only very dangerous in the first 3 levels, because if you Self-Fireball, your team is going to die. Oh, wow, Chris. Holy shit. Yeah. If you land on the Wild Magic Surge and you Self-Fireball, you're probably going to at least knock out a few of your party members. How a DM can circumvent it is the DM calls for the Wild Magic Searches. For me, as a DM, if you play a Wild Magic Sorcerer, you will search it as often as you can. Basically, if you're Tides of Chaos, the next spell you cast, I'm going to ask you to roll on the search table as long as you're level 3 and above. But that is DM dependent, so tell your DM, ask your DM, I want to have fun with this subclass, and for me to have that fun, I really want to roll on the Wild Magic Search as often as possible. The DM may consider, among the entire list, the Self-Fireball and the Self-Confusion is the single worst things. So, but it's like a 4% chance of landing on those. So, to me, it's very safe. The Wild Magic table, 70 to 80% is beneficial or neutral. It's only that 20% that's not. Of those 20%, only one of them can screw your entire day up or your entire party, because 8d6 damage at level 1 or 2 is TPK material. You imagine level 1 you have 6 to 12 HP, maybe 14 if you're a bard, or 15. Average damage of freaking fireball is 27. You fail to save, instantly dead. So, Wild Magic Sorcerers are something that, if you know how to play them, are actually one of the strongest sorcerer subclasses, if you ask me. Because they can do so much shit, and they get nonsense like free action surge. Yeah, some DMs will troll you. You're talking to an important NPC, trying to negotiate them. Roll a 1d100 for me. As you look at your DM in horror. Really? Yes, now roll it. Fuck me. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say that because of YouTube. Oh well. Oh, yeah, you're right. This one I do think that, perhaps you'd like it. Perhaps you'd like it. Oh, hello, Gary.
Hey, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. It's at the tail end of the session already, so I'll be uploading it to YouTube anyway, so feel free to ask any questions on Spellcasters if you like.
Oh, okay.
Well, Magic Sorcerer is Gacha the subclass. You heard it here first. If you like to Gacha, play a Wild Magic Sorcerer.
I'm horrible at gacha.
Yep. I like certain Gacha games, and then I always lose interest. Yeah, but yeah, play more Spellcasters. I don't want to see parties with 8 marshals anymore. Sorry, 7 marshals. It's a fun world of magic. Why not consider a character that manipulates the weave, is able to drop spells on the willy-nilly. Of course, be very careful of your spell slots, because tip for the DMs who are in the channel. Your DM may follow the DMG's recommendation of 6 to 8 medium encounters a day. Whether it's combat, whether it's a social encounter, to burn your spell slots. Sometimes it's necessary to burn them, but because when you're high level, especially those of you who've played a tier 3 spellcaster, you know that you will almost never run out spell slots if you only fight 1 or 2 fights a day. You absolutely know you'll never run out spell slots, even if you spam them like hell. So it's up to the DM to balance it. Some modules will balance it for them. But as what you've seen probably in quite a few of your AO modules, combat is sometimes back-to-back with no short rest in between. It's to balance the martial classes. They tend to work much better with short rest thrown in between, or when there's so many battles that the spellcasters are running low on spell slots. Yeah, initiative is very important for spellcasters. Very important. I would say that initiative is probably your second most important stat, not your constitution. Because if you go first and take down the enemy first, you're going to save your team a lot of damage. Yes, Cornelius. No longer what do you call it? Jerry. Also, something controversial I'll say today. The DM can rule however they want, even if they want to ignore Jeremy Crawford's own way of ruling his games, because he runs his games how he interprets the rules. Your DM runs the game how they interpret the rules. Nobody is truly wrong, nobody is truly correct. It's always a discussion and see what happens on the table. I don't follow all of the sage advice. You can't smite with your fist. What do you mean you can't smite with your fist? If I want to smite the enemy, if I want to use Divine Smite with my fists, I am going to allow my player to use Divine Smite with their fists. Alright. How much con would you recommend for frontline clerics? At least 14. At least. You need the con saving throws, which you're not proficient in. And the extra 2 HP goes a very long way. Trust me. Because just imagine you're using a D8 HP, so you get 5 HP on average. By level 5, you get 25 plus your con mod, so that is, for example, 14, that's plus 10. 10 out of 25 is literally 40%, a 40% boost. It's a very, very big number. The +1, you think about it, nothing much. And then when you compare it in percentages, you're like, that's a 40% boost to my HP. That is a shit ton. And yes, you also will need your constitution to be high to maintain concentration on spells. Tough may be a choice, but a lot of people, if you think about like +2 con versus tough, you get 1 HP per level versus +2 HP per level. The benefit of having a higher con save may be more beneficial, especially because it's not just spells that need a concentration saving throw. Stuff like poison, stuff like your DM trolling you when you drink alcohol, you need those con saves. Let's see. Yeah, unfortunately, the errata has made it so that you need a weapon as your material component that has more than 5 SP. So you literally cannot cast Booming Blade with Shadow Blade. I will still allow it on my table, non-AL table, but it depends on the DM for that one, because rule as written, tak boleh. Netherlands don't throw what lah. Oh my god, I throw my players like half. I can spend half the session throwing my players. Roll another strike on each other. It does 1 psychic damage, not the 4 bludgeoning. Especially when they're drunk and slapping each other. Let's see. Yep, correct. Nat 1 on saving throws is never an automatic failure. That's another thing that a lot of people get confused on. Nat 1s and Nat 20s are anything except attack rolls and death saving throws. It's nothing special. Yep, Cornelius, especially with a paladin in the party, it's quite easy to actually get to +9 because suddenly it's +3 to +5. Convert clerics mass. Yep. Depending on the DM, like I've straight out told my players, if you play a piece of Twilight Cleric, I am going to, most of my smart enemies are going to beeline for you because you're freaking giving them like amazing shit all the time. Oh, the cat. Peace in Twilight. God damn it, I hate that. It's fine. I shall keep my opinions to myself on Tasha subclasses. It's something I wish to not discuss in a video. I'll take that offline with you, Greg.
Just say it's OP.
It's
We,
mega.
we all
It's
know
so
we
OP.
all know it. We all
I
know
hate
it.
it. I hate it.
No,
And
yeah.
eloquence parts. Oh, I hate it.
Yeah.
I hate it
Oh
so
no,
gosh.
I
I
hate
was
it so
planning to
much.
take it.
In AL everything goes, but in my home game I say if you do this, sure, go ahead. You know, that's your idea of fun. I won't stop you, but I will adjust my tactics accordingly, lah, just to make sure that everything's challenging. And yes, I hate it. Nope. Yep. Well, very good. I see a lot of people are being very participative today. D&D is a scary world. Yes, it is. I threw an adult blue dragon to my level 1 players. And none of them died. Yep. Trend Monk is a min-maxer. DM is a scary person. I mean, if your DM... Eloquence Bards are very OP, and it eliminates fun for both the player as well as the DM, I would say. You immediately get reliable talent at level 3 for persuasion and deception. You know, it's amazing if you're able to RP that well, but in most cases, DM, I will automatically roll 17. Do I pass the DC? You know, that sucks the fun out of D&D for me. Immediately, automatic success, and you're like, oh my, okay, it's a class feature. Go ahead. And I'm not going to inflate the DC. I'm not going to inflate the difficulty class because you chose a subclass. I'm going to stick to what I've planned to not punish the player, but it immediately auto-successes a few encounters, which to me kind of sucks out the fun of the rolling for dice and seeing just as well. If you're able to RP the character well, I'd say no problem. In fact, I'd be very happy that you're able to roleplay a silver tongue character in that manner. It's not that. It's more like a player tells me, I literally cannot roll below 20. And you're like, as a DM, you just have to say, yes, boss, I accept. Alright. Don't worry, Gray. If it happens, I'll only just target you. No problem. Another DM, no such thing as level appropriate encounters. Of course there are. Whatever I deem level appropriate is level appropriate. Wizards, to me, is Dex. To me, really, it's Dex. Because if you play a wizard, right, you shouldn't be in a position where you have to roll con saving throws if you play it right, and your enemies don't have the capacity to reach you. It will depend on your DM style, Chris. So if your DM is the type that or you're playing a campaign which has a lot of like teleporters, you may want con better because you need to maintain concentration on your spells. It really depends on the campaign that you're in. Dex is more universal, gives you AC, gives you initiative. And your HP is shit as a warlock, as a wizard anyways. The god stat in 5e is definitely Dex, not Charisma. Charisma is only if you min-max and multi-class here and there. Yeah, Dolly, I don't like Eloquence Bar. It's OP. Did you know they can freaking debuff saving throws by 1d12? I don't know. I really don't know. Creation Bar is not so crazy. Eloquence Bards, I don't like it. If you want to play it, have fun. I'm not there to tell you how to play your D&D. Soul Bar is not bad. You get flourishes and stuff.
I see several people typing. Wow.
Yep. Happy to see lots of activity tonight. It's usually these sessions that I find is the most interactive. You know, like people typing, people voicing out certain questions they have, because that's end of the day what you want. The thing about based on player RP, Keen Bean, is it's a double-edged sword. If the player is very good at RPing, that's an amazing player. As a DM, I love to have on my table. But I'm not very charismatic in real life. You expect me to be able to come up with a convincing argument 20 times out of 20, it's gonna be pretty hard. So some players, especially when it comes to charisma checks, you know, it's hand wave. I would like to convince him that no matter what, I would like to save his kingdom, blah 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 blah. So that's a persuasion roll, but you don't have to describe it in detail because it's unfair to some players who are a bit more introverted to RP a very charismatic character. So a narrative explanation sometimes does help you to play your character a little bit better because the character is charismatic, not you. For example, if you say it as a barbarian, I want to jump off a 20-story building. The barbarian will probably survive that, but I'll ask you, do you think a player will jump off a 20-story building? Probably not. You're not going to ask a player to do what a PC can physically. So it's not fair to ask a player to do what a charismatic PC can do in person. Although having said that, I do have the most fun when the player RPs the PC as someone very persuasive / deceptive. You know, it truly adds to that scene. I tend to give inspiration / advantage for those situations as a form of reward. Yeah, because again, like I said, if they like, I don't know how to say this, DM, takkan you're gonna say that, oh, your character has absolutely no idea how to say this. Next, it doesn't make sense when your character is envisioned as someone who's like perfectly able to confuse enemies with his honey-laced words and amazing voice, you know, stuff like that. Musician, but top tier caster, good feat for wizards. Feats is very complicated, so Chris, I would say that probably requires a full session by itself. Generally speaking, you want Resilient Con because you're squishy and it helps you with your concentration savings throws. A lot of the Tasha's new spells are very good, so Skill Expert, you can, for example, get expertise in Arcana, which helps a lot in various different scenarios, and it still gives you a +1 int. You get Fey Touch, you get Shadow Touch, which gives you additional spells. I think those are the standout ones to me, at least. Spell Sniper is a trap in most cases, unless your DM likes to play those very far-range campaigns where you literally can abuse your 600 or 300 feet range. And because Spell Sniper requires an attack roll, most spells in D&D do not require attack rolls, they are saving throws, especially in high-level spells. Key Mine. Key Mine is a way to troll your DM. But it's something I, in fact, gave my player for free because of their backstory. I shall learn to regret it. Conductor Baton is you can reflavor anything. In D&D, most DMs are happy for you to reflavor your spells or your arcane focus as long as it doesn't break the mechanics of the game underlying. The honky guitar, roll a d4. I mean, I would allow that in my home game, Chris. If the wizard has Keen Mind and he reads a spell book, he can take his own time later. He doesn't need to have the spell book in front of him to copy paste it because he has photographic memory. Warcaster, generally speaking, Warcaster is good at low levels, it's worse at high levels. This is because of how advantage versus the proficiency bonus works. Advantage means you roll twice, take the higher number, but you can roll shit twice. But with Resilient Con, and Warcaster's thing only affects concentration. So for example, a poison, it does absolutely nothing for a poison. Resilient Con will work to reduce that, to resist the poison is one thing. Second thing is it will also help to, because your proficiency bonus is +3, +4, +5 at high levels. You know, it could very well outweigh advantage on rolling, especially at very high levels. Fate Touch is good, Resilient Warcaster. Yep, Cornelius, you mentioned it right. Depends, you have a lot of confidence. Yeah, someone actually crunched numbers. So advantage is, if I'm not wrong, effectively a +3.5, 3.85. Resilient Con is whatever your proficiency mod in. So by levels 9 or so, Resilient Con, mathematically speaking, is always better, but having Warcaster feels good because you get to roll that advantage. So it just depends on you. If you need to use any of the other components of Warcaster, get Warcaster, full stop. Let's see. Rangers, yeah, Noah's that depends on your DM. because it's I don't think that's a Tasha's thing. Tasha's allows them to do it per AS ability score increase level. But because rangers are the one, rangers don't make sense to me to be known spellcasters because flavor wise to me at least, they should their power comes from attuning to nature, just like druids. They can use druid spellcasting focuses. Druids are prepared spellcasters. Why are they known spellcasters? I can only ask Wizards of the Coast, but perhaps it's for balancing reasons. Place a bar. Yep. Retraining option in 5e. There for feats. No, for 5e there is a retraining option for Tasha's. For feats, I would say is DM Fiat in a home game. AL, no, no. You can AL. Sorry, right now the ruling is you can rebuild your character as many times as you want. You can be a level 16 fighter today and a level 16 wizard tomorrow. Unfortunately, that is the case. I don't like it, but it does allow players to experiment with the spellcaster classes. So since I've armed you all with quite a bit of information today, you'll see how it goes. If you feel like trying out spellcaster, definitely consider some of the things I've taught you today. Or at least I've also learned a few things today based on the discussions, especially the one that KD mentioned. And yep, you can change your cantrip, spells, fighting style, feats. DM can decide, I would say. Like for example, you tell the DM that my character after a time skip of 4 to 5 years is no longer really someone who is very athletic. So maybe take out athlete feat. Is that possible, DM? I would like to swap it. Maybe Keen Mai. The DM will discuss with your DM. If the DM says yes, why not? It's always depending on the DM, Cornelius. There's no rule, but it's fixed in. There's no rule to support changing your feats, Dolly, by rules. Yep, in AL, the rebuilding in AL right now is that you can swap everything about your character except their name, if I'm not wrong, every single session now. So you're literally everyone in AL right now is a prepared spellcaster, including your cantrips. I don't like it because it removes a lot of flavor, but it is what it is. So that's how it is. It does help when now the leveling requirements are much tougher. Yep, retraining is included in Tasha's for subclasses, interestingly. So you can discuss with your DM if they use that option to allow the player to swap subclass. It takes a big sum of money and time. Yes, Dolly, you can change your spells every day. Now with the unlimited rebuild, you can put in limits like you can't change your spells during my session, but after my session you can. It is that way. Yep. Yep. I see the bolded. Oh my god. Oh yeah, thanks Katie. It's rebuilt in between sessions. But it's possible. They literally can change the spells between sessions. Today they can have spell A. Tomorrow they can literally be another class and have spell B. It's good for experimentation. Which is also why something that's very important that I mentioned earlier today, please ping your spell for your DM. Please. Whatever you do, ping your spell for the DM so that they know what the hell the spell is all about. Are we all dittos? Yes, if your DM uses Tasha's Cornelius, if your DM everything in Tasha's the optional class features, it's optional. If your DM doesn't use it, it's not available. Same with multiclassing and feats. Actually, this is something a lot of people take for granted. Multiclassing and feats are DM allowed optional rules. Yep. Yeah, that's right, Katie. Based on honor system, we will allow you to do whatever you want. But if, for example, your turn takes too long, the DM, you as the DM, have the power to tell them that, okay, your turn is taking too long. Perhaps we'll keep it to the end of the round, or I'll have to skip your turn. You know, it's perfectly within your power to say so. Especially if he's on a feature he's never used before, and is like doing that for 5 to 10 minutes on his turn. Dolly, you know what I do? I just say, sure, give me the token for that. Thanks. Sometimes I'm nice. I feel nice. I'll prepare one, but most of the time I say, give me the token for that. Thank you. Then I give them the website to make tokens. Or I'll just use a placeholder token and tell them that imagine it is this thing because I want to keep the game flowing. All right. I think thank you all very much for tuning into this 2-hour workshop. I think I have nothing more to share. I hope that today's session has truly brought a spellcasting in a new light, or at least a good reminder to most of you here. I understand that I am not the most experienced DM, so I don't know all the rules. But again, to me, my favorite quote is, nobody truly knows all of the rules of D&D. Not even Jeremy Crawford himself, I would say, because it's always up to interpretation. And in the heat of the moment, some things are just more exciting to be run how the DM wants it to. You can remind them, especially if it's being ruled wrong, but let the DM run it. Generally speaking, everyone wants to have fun. If your DM is the type that's just antagonizing you for no conceivable reason whatsoever, you need to have a talk. Alright, thank you all very much. I'll be ending today's workshop here, and I am going to try and fiddle with this recording. I hope it worked. But yes, thank you all very much. I'll be dialing off for tonight, and see you all in the next few games. Okay, goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
You're
Bye
welcome.
bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye bye.
Thank you, thank you.